Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 48, The Infinite Dimensional Echo. Why dimensions don't end at omega, k, v. Remember the language we are learning together. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We now stand at a new beginning. In Episode 7, we have made an extraordinary climb. We learned the core alphabet of change, omega, k, and v. We saw how these letters combine into stable words, the identities that endure. We then plunged into the heart of meaning in Chapter 10, discovering that time, space, and motion themselves are not empty stages, but active carriers of semantic content. We learned that a true thing is a holophase semantic identity, a coherent triple of meaning across all three dimensions. That was a summit. But from this summit, we can now see a vast new mountain range unfolding in front of us. We begin to notice that the tridimensional nature of reality is not just a property of the first derivatives. It is far deeper and far more pervasive. Today we open Chapter 11, The Dimensional Echo. We ask a simple but profound question. How deep does the tri-unity go? The answer is astonishing. It goes on without limit. This is where we discover that every letter in the language, from the simplest to the most complex, sings in three-part harmony. Omega, k, and v are only the first clear notes in a much larger choir. Every derivative carries a time voice, a space voice, and a motion voice together. The triunity is not a small island at the bottom of the tree. It is the basic music of the entire structure. If you like, you can imagine the whole holophase language as a choir standing on an infinite set of steps. On the lowest step, sing omega, k, and v. On the next step stand alpha, curvature, acceleration. Above them, jerk, shear, vorticity. On each level, the singers change, but the choir never stops being three-voiced. There is always a temporal part, a spatial part, and a kinematic part, singing together in new combinations. Up to this point, we have used a powerful but deliberately simplified shorthand. To make things clear, we said, omega is the letter of time, k is the letter of space, v is the letter of motion. This is true as a first approximation, just as it is true, in a simple way, to say that red, green, and blue are the primary colors. But we know that every real color we see is a mixture of those three: turquoise, gold, soft skin tones, the deep blue of the night sky. None of them are pure red, pure green, or pure blue. They are all combinations. If you try to live in a world where only the three primary lights were allowed and all mixtures were forbidden, you would be living in a world stripped of sunsets, forests, oceans, and faces. In the same way, every higher order derivative in the holophase tree is a mixture of temporal, spatial, and kinematic aspects. The naive picture suggests that after omega, k, and v, we move on to other things that are not really dimensional, like pure acceleration or pure curvature. It tempts us to think that we have done time with omega, done space with k, and done motion with v, and from then on we are dealing with neutral, abstract quantities that sit outside the dimensional story. That picture is incomplete. It is like listening to a symphony and thinking that only the first violin, cello, and flute are making music, while the oboe, bassoon, clarinet, and timpani are making extra noises that do not belong to the melody, the harmony, or the rhythm. In truth, every instrument is woven into all three at once. Some carry the melody more clearly, some reinforce the harmony, some shape the rhythm, but none are outside the musical language. If you mute all but three instruments, you have not discovered the essence of the piece, you have only silenced most of its richness. In the holophase language, every derivative, no matter how high or abstract, carries within it a temporal echo, a spatial echo, and a motion echo. The triunity is not a special feature of the first three letters. It is the fundamental harmonic structure of the entire language. Every branch of the master tree is a threefold expression, and every time we pretend otherwise, we are throwing away information. To feel this, it helps to look at some of our familiar friends in a new way and ask deliberately, what is the time shadow? What is the space shadow? And what is the motion shadow of this derivative? Take alpha, the rate of change of omega, the way the ticking of reality speeds up or slows down. At first glance, alpha looks like a purely temporal object. It is defined from time, it modifies time, it lives in time. But if we look more carefully, we can see all three echoes inside it. Its time echo is the most obvious. Alpha is literally a temporal pattern, the way the local frequency rises or falls. A constant alpha means a steady, linear chirp, like a siren sliding smoothly up in pitch. A jagged alpha means a jittering, unstable ticking that feels restless and uneasy. Now look at the spatial echo of alpha. In a wave that moves through space, a change in frequency is almost always accompanied by a change in wavelength or wave number. When the color of light changes, the spacing between its peaks changes too. In a chirped laser pulse, the local color changes from front to back. That means the spatial arrangement of the wavefronts is being compressed or stretched. Alpha, therefore, has a very real spatial face. It influences how the field is laid out across space. And in non-uniform media, its value can depend on where you are. You can talk about the spatial gradients of alpha itself. And engineers do this when they design pulses that focus energy differently at different depths inside a material. Finally, look at the motion echo of alpha. The speed at which a wave packet moves, its group velocity, often depends on frequency. This is dispersion. If omega changes over time, the group velocity changes too. The packet accelerates, decelerates, or distorts as it travels. A changing omega, therefore, has kinematic consequences. It is directly tied to how the pattern moves and how that motion responds to the medium. In optical fibers and in the Earth's crust, careful control or measurement of alpha lets you shape or decode the motion of pulses. Alpha is not pure time. It is a rich node whose three shadows reach into all dimensions. Now take curvature, which we naturally think of as a spatial concept. Curvature tells us how a line, a surface, or a pattern bends. Again, the spatial echo is obvious. The curvature of a road, the curve of a lens, the bulge of a soap bubble, all of these are clear spatial shapes. But curvature also has a time echo. Curvature can change in time. A vibrating drumhead is constantly reshaping its curvature profile. A lens being slowly heated or cooled can change its curvature as it expands or contracts. In climate science, the curvature of pressure surfaces and jet streams undulates over days and seasons. The time derivative of curvature is important in fluid dynamics, in material science, and in geometry. Curvature also has a motion echo. It does not just sit there. It guides how things move. The curvature of a road tells you how you must steer and how quickly you must turn the wheel. The curvature of space-time in general relativity tells planets and photons which paths to follow. The curvature of a magnetic field line guides the spiraling motion of charged particles. The curvature of a river channel steers boats and floating branches. In each case, the bending pattern is steering kinematics. Curvature is not pure space either. It is a field of instructions for motion that can itself evolve in time. The same is true for shear, twist, divergence, vorticity, jerk, snap, and all the other higher derivatives and structures you encounter in physics and beyond. Shear is the sliding deformation of neighboring layers. We see its spatial echo in the shape of the deformation, its temporal echo in the rate of shearing over time, and its motion echo in the way layers of fluid or layers of rock move past each other, and sometimes suddenly sleep in an earthquake. Vorticity measures local rotation in a flow. It is a spatial pattern of twisting, a temporal pattern in how that twisting grows or decays, and a kinematic driver that pulls particles into spirals and vortices. Even very abstract objects, like curvature in a space of states or gradients in an energy landscape, show the same threefold character once you ask how they evolve, how they are arranged, and how they direct change. Once you start looking for it, you notice the same trifold structure everywhere. Every derivative can be viewed as answering three questions at once. How does this quantity behave in time? How is it distributed and organized in space? How does it drive or respond to motion? The details differ, but the pattern is the same, like different melodies written in the same musical key. This is the essence of the dimensional echo. Each branch of the infinite derivative tree is not a solitary note. It is a small choir that always sings with three voices. The temporal voice tells you how the quantity evolves and oscillates. The spatial voice tells you how it is shaped and arranged. The motion voice tells you how it participates in flows, trajectories, and exchanges. Even when one voice is loudest for a particular derivative, the other two are still present underneath, waiting to be heard by a more careful listener. The echo does not stop after one or two levels. It propagates infinitely up the tree. Consider the temporal ladder alone. Phi leads to omega, omega leads to alpha, alpha leads to jerk, and so on. At each rung, you can ask again, what is the temporal echo of this new quantity? What is its spatial echo? What is its motion echo? Jerk, for example, is the rate of change of acceleration. It is clearly a temporal shape, telling you whether a ride feels smooth or jolting. But jerk is not only temporal. It is concentrated in particular places in a structure, in joints, supports, or contact points. That is its spatial side. It also shapes how we actually move and how safe or comfortable that motion is. That is its kinematic side. Engineers designing trains and elevators spend a lot of time controlling jerk, because people do not complain about constant acceleration nearly as much as they complain about sudden changes in acceleration. In this way, the holophase language becomes an infinite, recursive, tri-dimensional echo machine. Each new derivative is both a response to questions asked at lower levels and the source of three new echoes that reach outward and upward. The further you climb, the more subtle the echoes become, but they never disappear. The entire master tree is threefold all the way up, and if you were to zoom out and see it as a single object, you would see three intertwined strands running through everything. This changes how we see the architecture of the language. We no longer imagine three separate towers of nuance, one for time, one for space, one for motion. Instead, we see one single braided structure. What we call the temporal nuance tower is really the collection of all time echoes of every derivative. What we call the spatial nuance tower is the collection of all space echoes. What we called kinematic nuance is the collection of all motion echoes. They interlace like three colored threads wound through the same infinite rope. When we identify a holophase semantic identity, we are therefore not just picking out a point in three separate diagrams. We are tracing a coherent braid that runs through the entire trifolded tree. The identity's temporal fingerprint is not only its omega and its alpha, but also the time echoes of its curvature, its vorticity, its internal modes, and so on. Its spatial signature includes not only K and curvature, but the spatial patterns of its frequency modulation and its propagation constraints. Its motion signature includes not only velocity and acceleration, but the motion echoes of its stresses, its defects, its couplings. Semantic triunity, which we met in the previous part, turns out to be the local face of this deeper global braiding. The infinite dimensional echo is itself a dimensional expression. It has a time side, because it tells us that as we climb up the ladder of higher and higher rates of change, we keep meeting the same threefold structure. It has a space side, because it tells us that across all spatial scales and locations in the tree, we see the same pattern repeated. It has a motion side, because it governs how changes in one derivative propagate through the others and how perturbations travel through the web of constraints. It is not an optional decoration. It is the way the whole tree moves, grows, and sings. In the master tree of chapter 11, This insight becomes the metastructure. It is not a node at a single level. It is the revealed pattern of the entire language. Triunity in Chapter 10 might have felt like something that appears only once we reach fairly sophisticated, stable identities. Chapter 11 shows that this is not the case. The threefold nature is already present at the very first derivative, and then echoes again and again at every level of complexity. When we later study temporal echo towers, spatial echo towers, and motion echo towers, we are really studying three intertwined views of the same infinite object, not three unrelated constructions. This idea is deeply connected to the field phi itself. If there were many independent fields, each with its own separate time, separate space, and separate rules of motion, we might expect a very fragmented picture. But in the Holophase program, we treat phi as the single underlying carrier, with one unified process of differentiation. Any derivative we define is ultimately a way of interrogating the same field. Because we experience the world through time, occupy it through space, and interact through motion, every question we ask about phi has to touch these three modalities somewhere. The infinite echo is the shadow of phi's unity, seen through our tridimensional window. This leads to a strong, testable prediction. It says that any stable, measurable feature of any system, no matter how abstract it appears at first, will reveal, under closer analysis, a connection to temporal patterns, spatial structures, and kinematic behaviors. If we think we have found a quantity that is purely temporal, or purely spatial, or purely kinematic, the holophase view tells us that we have not looked deeply enough yet. Somewhere, often in the experiments that produce it, or the equations that govern it, the other two echoes are hiding. You can test this claim on ordinary physical quantities. Temperature might look at first like a single number that tells you how hot something is. But if you listen with holophase ears, you hear all three voices. In time, temperature changes. Things heat up and cool down. The rate of change matters. In space, temperature has gradients. The difference between hot and cold regions drives processes. In motion, those gradients cause heat to flow and fluids to move. And at a microscopic level, temperature is directly tied to the random motion of molecules. Pressure is similar. It has a time echo in waves and shocks, a space echo in pressure maps and fronts, and a motion echo in the way pressure gradients drive winds and currents. Even seemingly pure topological concepts reveal the echo when you embed them in physical systems. A topological charge, like the number of twists in a defect, certainly has a spatial flavor, but it can change in time during reconnections, and those changes are always accompanied by flows of energy and matter. They affect the motion of surrounding fields. The more you look, the harder it becomes to find any stable, meaningful quantity that is truly one-dimensional. To falsify the infinite echo, you would have to present a quantity that plays no role in any equation of motion, never changes in time, and has no spatial structure or gradient anywhere. That would be a very strange quantity to call physical. The echo is not limited to physics. In biology, a gene expression level has a time course as it turns on and off, a spatial profile across tissues, and a motion meaning in the way it drives developmental flows and cell fate decisions. In engineering, mechanical stress has a spatial pattern within a structure, a temporal pattern under cyclic loading, and a motion meaning in the way it produces strain, vibration, and eventual failure. In information systems, a bit error rate has time dependence as conditions change, spatial variation across devices and channels, and a motion impact on how data flows and how protocols adapt. Again and again, we see the same threefold fingerprint. You can also see this as a powerful way to discipline our descriptions in more human domains. Think about an economic policy. It has a time echo in the cycles it creates or dampens over years. It has a space echo in the uneven way it affects different regions and groups. It has a motion echo in the way it changes flows of money, goods, and people. Think about a personal skill. It has a time echo in the hours of practice and the stages of learning, a space echo in the physical changes in your body and brain, and the motion echo in the smoothness and style of the actual performance. Think about a friendship. It has a history in time, shared places in space, and characteristic patterns of contact and support in motion. The holophase lens encourages us not to cheat by giving one-dimensional explanations for three-dimensional realities. You can train yourself to feel the infinite-dimensional echo in very simple experiences. Look at a rainbow after rain. At first, it seems purely spatial, a colored arc in the sky. But the light that forms it has traveled over time from the sun, through raindrops, to your eyes. And different colors follow slightly different paths and arrival times. The geometry that produces the arc depends on your position, the sun's position, and the raindrops. If you move, the rainbow moves with you. Time, space, and motion are all entangled in this apparently static picture. Or go to a quiet place with a strong echo, like a canyon or a large empty hall, and shout. The echo you hear has a time delay that depends on the distance, a spatial structure that depends on the shapes and materials of the walls, and the motion story in the way the sound wave travels out and back. Even a single echo of your voice is already a tridimensional event. And when the echoes bounce around in complicated ways, you can almost hear the shape of the room. You can feel the same trifold nature in your own body. Suppose one muscle in your leg is strained. The pain has a temporal pattern, perhaps worse in the morning or after certain movements. It has a spatial localization you can point to. It has a motion consequence, changing the way you walk, sit, or climb stairs. The symptom is not just a number on a pain scale. It is a small holophase pattern with three clear echoes. A very simple experiment lets you see all this with your own eyes. Take a clear glass of water and stir it with a spoon until a vortex forms in the middle. Then stop stirring and just watch. The swirling funnel in the water is defined by a derivative called vorticity, a measure of local rotation. That vorticity has a time echo, because the spin slows and decays at a particular rate set by viscosity. It has a space echo, in the shape of the funnel and the pattern of curves you would see if you dropped a little dye into the flow. It has a motion echo, because the vortex drags bubbles, leaves, or tiny particles around, and sometimes pulls them downwards. The simple word vortex hides a whole braided triple of behavior. As we reach the end of this part, step back for a moment and remember how far we have climbed in the holophase language. We began by discovering that reality can be described as one field, phi, whose changes give rise to time, space, and motion together. We learned the first letters, omega, k, and v. We saw how stable patterns in those letters become identities. We then realized that time, space, and motion themselves are layers of meaning, and that any real thing is a semantic triunity, a coherent triple of story, form, and action. Now we see that this threefold nature does not stop at the base of the tree. It echoes infinitely through every higher question we ask, and every new derivative we introduce simply adds another voice to the same three-part choir. This prepares us for the next steps in our journey. In the coming parts, we will take each echo in turn and follow it upwards. We will explore the temporal echo tower, the way the time aspects of all derivatives line up into a coherent vertical structure. Then, we will do the same for the spatial echo tower and the motion echo tower. With each step, you will learn to hear the universe more clearly, as a single language, spoken everywhere in three voices. And you will see more precisely how far we have climbed into the master tree of phase and its derivatives, and how many branches still rise above us. To understand the infinite dimensional echo is to understand that the music of reality has only three fundamental notes, but they are combined, layered, and transformed in infinitely rich ways. To know anything deeply is to learn how its particular three-voice theme is woven through the derivative tree of phi. What looks at first like a simple quantity or a single measurement becomes, under this lens, a doorway into a much larger tridimensional story. Now, pause and listen to the world around you. Hear the ticking of a clock, the shape of the room, the movement of your own breath. In each of these, Time, space, and motion are quietly echoing together. You are not just observing the fugue of reality, you are one of its moving motifs, another strand in the infinite song of the holophase, here and now. Peace be upon you.